Hi guys, and welcome to Polyphonic Tarot. Today we will be doing a 3-card reading, or I should say, because I'm doing 2 readings today. This first reading is a 3-card reading clarifying the result of a previous reading I did for someone who was looking to see what the opportunities to retire were for her. So we did that reading a little while ago, and the overall outcome for that reading was, as you remember, the Knight of Swords. And so your question for me today is basically to kind of try to clarify what that Knight of Swords was about. In the reading, I just rewatched most of that video, and for the most part, it seemed pretty clear, and I still think it was clear in retrospect, re-looking at it. It was pretty clear that that it was okay to retire soon, and that the overall advice was that retiring was not a bad idea. And then the overall outcome was the Knight of Swords, and I said that the Knight of Swords could represent a disturbance of some kind, but the Knight of Swords can also represent focus and a sort of single-mindedness that can be very effective in going about a specific task or reaching a certain goal or bringing something to completion. The Knight of Swords is all about that sense of just striving and focus and just a lot of momentum towards one specific goal, really. So it could have multiple meanings. So what we're going to do today is we are going to ask, using a 3-card spread, what exactly that Knight of Swords maybe had to do with. And I want to show you guys my new case. I bought this on Amazon, this little bag here. I believe it was from Llewellyn or something, but it was pretty decent price, and it's really beautiful, so I'm happy with that. So I've been using it, I should say, to store my taut cards. So anywho, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the Knight of Swords. If we can find him, wouldn't that be nice? Where are you? There he is. Okay, so there was our overall outcome from the last reading. And we are wondering, in regards to your situation, what exactly the Knight of Swords was attempting to represent. What kind of energy does he represent? What sort of event does he represent, or person does he represent? Why did we receive the Knight of Swords as the overall outcome? So we're going to go ahead and invoke. And shuffle. I haven't been using these cards very much lately. I've been, as you know from my recent videos, I've been using that Legacy of the Divine Tarot quite a lot lately. So I actually haven't been using my taut cards, which is kind of odd for me. Should also keep in mind, before we do this reading, that just to kind of review some of that previous reading, that the crown card that you had received for that Celtic Cross was the Four of Swords, and we talked about how all the air cards were connected on some level. And so the Knight of Swords would have been most likely connected to that concept of rest, of putting labors aside, taking a break, vacation, that sort of thing. And of course, you know, the Four of Swords was indicative of the opportunity to retire certainly being there, and certainly being a path you could take were you to choose it, and it's basically being a good path for you to take for all intents and purposes. And so, based on that, the Knight of Swords could represent finally making up your mind and choosing to go about that process of retiring. But we will double check here. Okay. So the three cards we have to elaborate on what kind of outcome the Knight of Swords represented. We have the Eight of Swords, the Seven of Discs, and the Six of Cups. Okay. Two of Swords is on the bottom of the deck. The Two of Swords is very similar to the Four of Swords. And so, yeah, and in conjunction with the Four of Discs, there's a connotation there that I get of putting, sort of like the expression "get your house in order." It's sort of along those lines of getting your monetary situation secure and stabilized, and figuring all that end of things out, because of course that's so important to really planning one's retirement successfully. And of course, retirement does have to do with rest and relative calm, more or less. And anywho, so the three main cards that you did receive: Eight of Swords, Seven of Discs, and the Six of Cups. The Eight of Swords is, of course, representative of your uncertainty, I get, from whether or not this is something that you should actually do. And I think, again, that's why the Knight of Swords is so important for representing selection of a specific course of action or plan or choice, whatever. And so the Knight of Swords in this case would be pretty opposite to the Eight of Swords. Those two cards are very opposite to each other. In my book, I see those cards as having very opposite energies, even though they are related. And the Seven of Discs has a sense of heavy work and having worked for a long time and just feeling a little drained. The Seven of Discs is sort of, again, in my book, is sort of like the Nine of Wands, in that there's a sense of exhaustion in the card because there's so much work has been done, whereas the Nine of Wands sort of bulls its way through it and sort of keeps going despite the fact that it's fatigued. You know, it digs deep to find energy to keep going. The Seven of Discs is more a card of toil and labor and difficulty. It's not an easygoing card, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of motivation behind it or inspiration, like the Nine of Wands sometimes can have. This one is much more mundane and much more just boring, honestly. It's this sense of just having worked for a long time, and you're looking to reap the rewards of that finally. And the Six of Cups, I think, the interesting thing, too, to recall your previous reading was that your hopes and fears, if I recall correctly, was represented by the Princess of Cups. And so we talked about how you were interested or eager to regain some sense of happiness here and regain a sense of creativity and more freedom to pursue that which you actually enjoy. And I think that that is also being said here with the Six of Cups being very similar to the Princess of Cups in that both of them represent a very pure kind of happiness, a very pure sense of pleasure or emotional success. And in some cases it's sexual, here it's not. Here it's just a kind of happiness that is very self-fulfilling, and it doesn't have any like negative ramifications to it. The release is very clean, and I just think that it's saying that the overall outcome for that reading that we did represents you finding a solution after having really thought about it for a long time, and after having put a lot of energy into thinking about it and thinking about the process and making the decision. I think you're going to end up deciding, figuring out how to simplify this situation for you. The other interesting what's the word I want here? Polarity, I guess, within this reading is the Two of Swords and the Eight of Swords. The Two of Swords and the Knight of Swords actually occupy the same Sephira, which could be interesting food for thought. So the two cards have actually, oddly enough, a very similar energy. Because they occupy the same space. Now, with that being said, the Two of Swords is very different from the Eight of Swords in the same way that the Knight of Swords sort of is. Because while the Eight of Swords, I should be careful how I say that, because the Eight of Swords and the Two of Swords both represent a kind of impasse of some kind, but the Two of Swords is much more gentle and much more benign about the whole thing, and it's more simplified. It's much more a question of black and white, whereas the Eight of Swords is a question of black, white, red, yellow, green, and orange, and so perhaps this is saying on some level that this is a matter of you simplifying this process and trying to reduce it to less factors and just trying to finally make the decision. I do think that there are a lot of factors going on that you are trying to consider, and I think your ultimate outcome here for that reading was representative of finally just deciding on it and going with what your heart's been telling you. So we'll go ahead and draw some additional cards here. Yeah, you want to get back to doing the things that you actually are passionate about. I mean, that's pretty clear. The Empress with the Eight of Swords perhaps speaks to the fact that maybe you are considering so many factors and you're so reluctant to really go through with it because you're concerned about others and you're concerned about the effect that this decision is going to have on other people. But at the same time, you really need to get jump-started here. I think that, and this was clear in the previous reading too, you're just very bored with your job and with your work, and you're pretty done with it. You feel like you've gotten out of it everything that you can get out of it. And I just think it's time for you to do something different, to re-energize your life. The Knight of Wands is, again, a card that's very opposite to the Seven of Discs. They're just completely opposite things. The Seven of Discs has been doing the same thing over and over and over again for years without really getting much different result. The Knight of Wands is someone who initiates something totally new and is a burst of new energy and creativity in a situation. So those two cards are very different from each other. So I don't see them as feeding into each other in any way, but as contradicting each other. Now, the Six of Cups received the Queen of Discs as its secondary card, which is interesting because the Queen of Discs is very similar, now cards that are actually similar, to, but it's similar to the Empress. The Empress and the Queen of Discs are very similar. They both represent nurturing and cultivation, and so I think that you're just... I don't know if family is very important to you, and perhaps you're hoping that with your retirement you will be able to spend more time with the people that you care about. I think that that is partially somewhat to do with it, also considering, again, that previous reading. But there's a sense of joy coming from being a homebody and getting back to, you know, doing things around your house and taking care of all the little things that you've maybe been neglecting because you've been too busy. The Queen of Discs takes care of all of those things. You know, she's the one who raises the kids, makes dinner, and you know, likes to clean and keep organized and be practical, and, you know, she's just a very practical person. So, you know, we always associate the Queen of Discs with, like, homebodies and that sort of thing, gardening and child raising and that sort of thing. You know, that's where she thrives. The Queen of Discs loves that sort of stuff. She reminds me of one of my grandmothers, actually, quite a bit. But anywho, I think that that is important to you at this time, and that's what that Six of Discs, excuse me, the Six of Cups is really getting at, that your true happiness at the moment is not really coming from your work, and so it is okay for you to look for it elsewhere. And I don't think that you need to necessarily throw yourself under the bus any longer here, because you aren't really helping anyone by doing that. You certainly aren't helping yourself, and I don't know how much you're actually helping other people. So, yeah, I mean, again, the Princess of Wands coming up again. She came up in the previous reading as well. Four of Wands for here. Again, I think the Four of Wands was also in the previous reading too. There's this sense of completion. You're done with what you can get out of your job. It's developed you as much as it's going to develop you as a human being. And the Princess of Wands, again, just indicative of you needing to do something new and different, and you need new energy in your life. The Five of Discs for concerns or worry. I'm not sure. But the Universe is sort of your overall advice card. I usually draw one last card for sort of summarizing the overall meaning. And the Universe is certainly indicative of things falling into place the right way. And so whenever the Universe comes up for questions such as these, it's usually a sign that the Universe, you know, the events that are happening around you, and the people and experiences that are all revolving around you and your own individual perspective, everything is slowly falling into place and coming together so that this situation can be brought to some kind of fulfillment. It's sort of like the card of divine order for me, anyway. I that's how I tend to see the Universe. It's very similar in essence to the Wheel of Fortune, but the Wheel of Fortune is a little bit more lackadaisical and a little bit more, it's a little more, what's the word I want? It's a little bit more mobile, but it's also a card that's sort of unexpected, whereas the universe, and it also keeps going, there's not a sense of finality with the Wheel of Fortune. The universe has a sense of finality, of things coming to an end, to a close, things reaching fulfillment. So I just think it's time, honestly. I really think that that's what the Knight of Swords is saying as far as your overall outcome, is that it's got to be time eventually. And I just see you as ultimately making that choice. So it wasn't so much of a disturbance as I supposed, more than it is just you finally focusing and choosing to go through with it after having thought about it for a long time. So I hope that that clears things up and helps you think about that previous reading a little bit better. And I wish you the best of luck, and I'd like to thank you again for your other purchase from me, as always. So thank you very much, and I hope it helps, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye-bye.